Nearly 4 years since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic, we are still learning more about the virus, our response, and frankly, how to do better in the future. Stephanie recently sat down with the authors of a book that aims to get to the bottom of it all.
Joining me tonight, Joe Nocera and Bethany McLean, co-authors of the new must-read book, The Big Fail: What the Pandemic Revealed About Who America Protects and Who It Leaves Behind. This book is a must-read. I know lots of people went through the pandemic and want to forget it. They can't. I don't want to say I loved every minute of reading it because it brings you back to such a terrible place, but it's important. And you actually write in the book, Bethany, that despite what people say, our country could not have done a better job dealing with the pandemic. Can you explain that?
So I think one of the things Joe and I have done in the books we've worked on is not so much chronicle the blow by blow of what happened as it melts down, but rather what set the conditions, what set the stage. And so what we tried to do here was say, what was America like as the pandemic hit? And that's how we got to that conclusion that we really couldn't have done that much better, because a lot of the conditions, like the breakdown in our supply chains, the terrible state of our healthcare system, predated the pandemic. And so I guess that's why I think this book is important too, because it's not so much how do we prevent the next pandemic, which could be important, but it's what does this tell us about the world we're living in and the problems we might need to fix before it's too late.
But we're not actually doing anything to prepare ourselves for the next pandemic. And that's what's amazing. Like, the moment this thing is over, we're like, okay, it's done. Now, if this were a terrorist attack, the government would be spending years figuring out, how do we prepare ourselves? How do we not let this happen again? A business would be preparing. The pandemic, not so much.
Well, but think about 9/11, there's a commission, right? After the financial crisis, there's a commission. And all of that led to changes, you know, in the society. They don't want to have a commission because we're so polarized. The question would be, what would they, so the one side would say, oh, masks don't work. And the other side would say, oh, we have to have masks. And there's no
vaccines.
Not to mention vaccines. So there's no one who's really interested in saying, let's put aside the politics, let's put aside the polarization, let's try to get at some truth. Nobody's interested in that.
Then when you think about all the systems that failed, how big a factor were our political divisions? Because I can't think of a time when we made public health something polarized in this country. That's something that you would think government would say, like, all right, let's put health and safety first. It became a political football.
Well, if you step back and say, why should your response to the pandemic, whether or not you wanted to wear a mask, whether or not you believed in lockdowns, why should that be an indication of your political affiliation? Why does one thing have anything to do with the other? We don't say that because you believe in XYZ treatment for cancer, that means you must be a Democrat or a Republican. And it's absurd. But yet we hunkered down in these ideological fortresses that we're still in, where we can't bear to hear that anything we might have thought during the pandemic might have been a result of ideology rather than actual science, which, by the way, is always changing, because science isn't an immutable thing. It's an ever-changing thing that adapts to the facts as we learn them.
Yet so many people refused to accept that at the time, or the fact that we were dealing with a virus we hadn't seen before. Can we talk about fraud, though? We saw fraud take place. I can't even think of a word big enough to describe the massive, grotesque fraud that transpired. And much of it, we knew it was going to happen. We saw it happening real time. I don't think any of us realized the magnitude of it. Is there anything being done now to prevent fraud in our system like that?
Well, it depends on what kind of fraud you mean. One kind of fraud was, you know, the Vietnamese companies making fraudulent gloves and masks that didn't work.
I wasn't even thinking of that.
You were thinking, I know what you were thinking about, the people who took the money and then used it on their own. Well, here's the thing. There actually was a debate inside the government between the Fed and the Treasury Department over
what's more important, getting the money out fast or getting it to the right people?
And the Fed wanted to get the money out fast, and the Treasury wanted to put the brakes on, and the Fed won. And even in I know there was a ton of fraud, but if you had not done it that way, if you had not gotten the money out fast, Bethany, I can see she's going to disagree.
You're lucky there's no open windows. I'd be jumping out of one right now.
People needed that money. They needed it desperately.
Well, some people did. Some people really, really needed it, but the fraud was extraordinary.
Right. So I think the place where I would disagree with Joe is to say that we have no mechanism in our society for getting money to people or to small businesses. We have this mechanism called the Federal Reserve for propping up corporate America and big business, but we do not have a way to get money. And that's what the government was up against. And that's a systemic, it's a structural issue. So you have to look at the structure rather than look at the people in charge. You have to look at the structure they were facing.
Can we talk about the media for a second? Because you talk about something really smart in the book. This need for, sound bites, right? Brief sound bites and answers, right? They need black and white answers. What lessons does the media need to take going through COVID when we look back on how we covered it? Because you weren't going to get through a pandemic with quick sound bites and here's what to do, America.
I think that I don't know is really powerful, and that a world awash in information, if you pretend to have the answer and you don't, people are going to figure out that you don't have the answer, and then they're not going to trust you going forward. And I think the worst legacy of the pandemic is that it frayed trust in institutions where trust was already fraying. Joe?
The other part of this is that the media was complicit in shutting out certain people who were not crazy. They were dissidents. They disagreed with the conventional wisdom about lockdowns and especially about school closings. School closings was a disaster, and a lot of harm was done. And the people who were screaming that from the top of their lungs were not listened to, and they didn't get play in the media until very late in the game. And that's a failing of the media, to simply accept. The media is supposed to be skeptical. They're not supposed to just say, oh, well, Anthony Fauci says we have to close the schools, so let's close the schools. The media's job should be to figure out whether that's the right call or not. And they didn't do that.
You write in the pandemic how we saw lots of big businesses, right? Business leaders go from having this globalization approach to resilience because they couldn't rely on a global supply chain anymore. Now that we're out of the pandemic, where are we in that conversation for those businesses? Are they still in resilience mode? Or have they snapped right back into the cheapest provider, which is on the other side of the world?
It's very hard to resist the cheapest provider.
Always.
So in the case of masks, for instance, masks is a really good example. These American companies started up hoping to sell American masks to American companies. But the minute the mask shortage was over, the Chinese dropped the cost of a mask to a penny, and everybody went back. But having said that, there definitely are efforts, especially among big companies, to create some resilience in the system so they're not as dependent as they have been on China, especially.
But it's really hard to go backwards. I mean, Elon Musk overshadowed all the news at the Deal Book conference with his crazy...
With his go F yourself? Yeah.
Yes. But I thought one of the more interesting moments was when the CEO of NVIDIA was asked about supply chains and the efforts to bring semiconductor manufacturing back to the U.S. And he basically said it's decades away. Even if it's doable, it's decades away. With no matter how much the U.S. can invest, we can't catch up to TSMC in Taiwan. And so the conversation is happening, but it might be too far gone.
You did talk about how some big companies during COVID, what they did to maximize profits, and how maybe that behavior led to a lot of these labor actions and unionizations in the last couple of years. Explain.
I think it's also worse than that. It's true, but people have been, just as supply chains were pushed to the limit and they broke in the pandemic, people have been pushed to the limit. Workers have been pushed to the limit. And essential workers were told by their companies, you get out there and man the front lines and we'll take care of you. And it turns out that most of the rewards as stocks appreciated, thanks in large part to the Federal Reserve's actions, went to shareholders and rather than to workers. And then you have other fields like education and even more importantly, healthcare, where people have just been fried to the bone and they're quitting. And where we go from here is an open question.
Are you hopeful that we've actually learned any lessons that we're taking going forward? I mean, maybe on a personal level, we've learned lessons to care for our neighbors, actually meet our neighbors, appreciate those essential workers. Maybe on an individual basis, we've learned something.
I think we have, but I think as on a societal level, I don't think we've learned anything, honestly. I'm sorry.
desperately trying to end on a high note, and you're not going to let me.
Bethany is Miss Optimism.
No,
You're like, not really.
I'm really not. So the first big project Joe and I worked on together was the Enron book, right? And at the time of Enron,
okay, there's no happy ending.
We all talked about how American business needed to be more long-term oriented, and that was the big lesson out of Enron. And here we are 20 years later.
That was 20 years ago.
Right?
We're worse now.
That didn't work. So I've gotten a little more skeptical over the last couple of decades about the obvious lessons. The lessons are always obvious, but we don't seem to learn them. And I think
that's because of short-termism.
It's because of short-termism.
Right, or even in the health system, we know now that 50 public health agencies in the states need to be coordinated. There needs to be, the federal government needs to do a better job of leading. There needs to be a more willingness to say, we don't know when we don't know. There needs to be a willingness to say, let's hear all voices, not just the establishment. None of that's happened.